I'm very excited to have with me Omar Johnson, who is leading pricing at Ryder. And yeah, maybe before we get started, if you could explain to everyone what Ryder actually does and how pricing fits in the organization.
Absolutely. So Ryder is a trucking and logistics company. We're headquartered out of Miami, Florida,
Hmm.
and we have several parts of the business. A lot of people know us for our leasing, so these large tractor trailers, uh, box trucks, sprinters, leasing vehicles. My responsibility on the pricing team is actually once those vehicles come off of lease, they come back into our inventory
Hmm.
and they become used vehicles. So based off of market conditions and um, kind of the specs and the components of each vehicle, our team is to price those vehicles out to be sold.
Okay. And what are some of the main pricing challenges in your industry and in your company?
I would say one of the hardest challenges is looking at competitors. It's a very
Mhm.
competitive industry. The vehicles themselves don't really differ from company. It's the same vehicles, but who can offer the better value? And then price is always one of those sticklers that um, are people's final purchasing decision.
Right. And before we talk a bit more about Ryder and pricing at Ryder, I know you have a very rich background in terms of pricing before you joined Ryder. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an overview of, how long have you been doing pricing and kind of what industries did you cover prior to joining Ryder?
Absolutely. So out of school, I started working at a hospital. That was actually my first job, doing operations as an analyst.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that was probably the most crucial role in my career because that's where you picked up a lot of the
The
skills that I
skills.
know today, using Excel, a lot of the main functions that everybody's familiar with. And of course, at a hospital, you have a lot of data that you have to know how to handle. So after that, after a few years, I started working at Office Depot at their corporate headquarters in Boca Raton, Florida, as a senior pricing analyst. And there, um, my eyes are open to a whole new world of pricing. A little bit more about my background. I have a marketing degree, and one of my passions is consumer behavior.
Mm-hmm.
How can you affect the customer to basically purchase what you want them to purchase? And I feel like pricing is one of those final steps in that process of that consumer
Absolutely.
behavior. Um, so at Office Depot, a large SKU count, over 1,100 stores at the time, several thousands or thousands of products per store. So it's really understanding what is that matrix and web of products and how do each product kind of interlock with each other. So as you change the price of one, it might affect, several products down the line. So at Office Depot, I did a lot of pricing and promotions, and then moved to Chicago for quite a few years, where I worked for a company called Levy Restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
where they do pricing for concessions at, pro sports arenas. So arenas, football stadiums, hockey arenas, and they built an analytical arm called E15. And E15 was basically built off of a group of analysts who wanted to bring uh, advanced analytics to the business. When you think about concessions pricing or you think about concession, it's a very old um, industry where if it's not broke, you won't fix it. A lot of these directors of operations are so focused on other things within their building that pricing is really the final thought. Like it's, well, what did we price it last
Right.
year? Let's just price it again, or let's just raise it 25 cents with not a lot of thought behind it. So there we brought in a lot of advanced analytics, working with the marketing team, how to bring in technology. And of course, one of the challenges was getting data. So you're dealing with these point of sales and you're trying to extrapolate, okay, well, when were the purchases made? How much were they made? Was it cash versus card? And basically collecting that data so we can make meaningful decisions moving forward.
Mhm.
Then after that, I moved back to South Florida, worked a little bit in supply chain back at Office Depot, and now here I'm at Ryder, back doing pricing.
Okay, very interesting. And you've worked in very different industries, actually, right? Retail and restaurants and logistics, B2B services. What are some of the common challenges, pricing challenges that companies are facing? One point you already mentioned, data and data availability. Um,
Yeah, I would say for most of the companies I worked for, pricing was not thoroughly thought through.
Hmm.
It was coming in there and saying, "Hey, we don't really have a pricing program. Can you help us?"
Right.
Or this is how we price. We know it's not the best, but we don't know what to do or how
Right.
to fix it. And I think nowadays a lot of companies are investing a lot more into their pricing teams and
Uh-huh.
pricing programs. But that was one of the challenges that I noticed when I started was kind of scratching my head to say, how do we fix this? How do we get smarter using the data? What are the key components we want to look at to price?
Hmm.
Okay, do we want to be cost plus pricing? Do we want to be um, to our competitors? If we do want to be priced to our competitors, is it higher, lower? What's the strategy? Um, so I would say that's probably one of the main challenges that we have had to deal with.
So what's the best fix to get around it? Is it solving the data issues? Is it getting people on board? Is it getting the leadership a little bit smarter about pricing? What is typically the most important part and also the sequencing and solving this?
I would say I think the most important part is getting leadership on board,
Yeah.
understanding that there is a need
Yeah.
to do better and investing and making that investment to um, knowing that there's value in pricing and making those efforts to do it. And once you have leadership and that commitment, then I think you work on getting clean data. Um, what's the strategy we want moving forward, and again, just investing in your people, investing your time, your efforts to know that pricing is going to make a significant impact in your business.
So if somebody's getting started on pricing and interested in improving pricing in the organization, how do they actually get the leadership on board? How do you convince the leadership to make an investment, hire a team, put the money where it's actually needed most? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say just a lot of research, and just kind of prove out whether it's be case studies
Hmm.
or other examples of, hey, we've been doing our pricing or we've been doing things this way for so long. I think there's opportunity here. And if you could even prove that out
Yeah.
doing some analysis or some work on the side and to say, hey, this is not fully fleshed out, but there's opportunity here. And if I think if we invest our time and our money, we can really expand this area of the business.
Fantastic. Yeah, let's shift gears a little bit and go back to Ryder. I'm particularly interested in inflation. Topic, hot topic right now. Just before we talk about pricing, how does inflation actually affect and impact Ryder? What are consequences of inflation for the company?
Right. So, as most people know, over the past year or so, the prices of vehicles has gone up tremendously.
Yeah,
And Ryder was no um, exclusion to that.
right.
We had vehicles that were, 3, 4, 5 years old, used vehicles being priced more than they were several years when they were bought brand new.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. And it becomes a challenge because um, understanding the market and understanding that there is a high demand and there's a low supply, and taking advantage of those economic conditions, but still understanding that price of gas is rising, people's spend is not going up. Prices are going up, but their pockets aren't getting bigger. So it's really working with the different teams to how can we, although increased price, still make our vehicles attractive, whether it's the um, after sale purchase or if it's different um, programs that we offer to make the vehicles still attractive.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that the value of the products is getting less, or that they're getting more expensive. It's that's the value of money is decreasing. Are there any specific actions, any particular activities that Ryder has undertaken in order to combat or even beat inflation?
I think from the used vehicle side, from where I am, I think we're really just trying to identify where are the opportunities
Mm.
to make significant changes. When as we were raising prices, we call it the peanut butter spread, right?
Right.
We know prices are going up, so we were just increasing 5%, 10% week over week. Um, and although that might not have been the most strategic,
Mm-hmm.
um, it was kind of very quick reactionary to what was happening in the
Yeah.
market. And I think now as we see prices start to plateau or things are starting to at least slow down. They're not moving as quickly as they were before. It's really our job to really pinpoint what are the needs of the customer, and are we making sure that we are adding value and making sure that those vehicles or those components are priced correctly.
Yeah.
And if not, let's take a step back and not be so quick to react, and be, again, more strategic on where we're taking our pricing and making sure that for the customer, because at the end of the day, we're servicing the customer. And we want to make sure that what we're providing to them is worth it in their eyes so that they can obviously spend their money
Right.
with us.
That's very interesting. So your strategy ultimately was, let's do something quick, even if it's just peanut butter spread, but we need to react. And now you're pausing and saying, hey, what can we actually fine tune, and what does, I suppose, the next increase have to look like? Okay, very interesting. Um, what are some of the things, and maybe not just talking about inflation, but in a broader context, have there been any activities, any projects in pricing that you undertook, and they were great learning experiences, but maybe they didn't pan out necessarily the way folks anticipated?
Um, I would probably say as it relates to promotions.
Hmm.
So on my team, we handle both pricing and promotions of the vehicles, and I think there is great value in having the right promotion strategy. I came in knowing that our promotion strategy wasn't the best, and trying different ways to change it. But of course, there's system limitations, and you working with the sales team, and when you're making these kind of drastic changes, it's not what they're used to. So there's a
Right.
lot of question, a lot of feedback. So understanding that, this is my first time working in a centralized pricing organization where there's several different field operators that I have to communicate with and I have to um, get on board. So it was a challenge of, hey, we're coming here and we're making changes, but don't worry, we have the data to back those changes up. So getting that sales team on board, I think, was probably um, an eye opener for me.
Uh,
Because at the end of the day, we're helping them sell the vehicles, and if we're making changes, they need to be on board or at least feel comfortable as we communicate those changes to them. So
but
I would say that was an eye-opening experience, and it's still something that we're still working on today. I think we have a great relationship
yeah.
with the sales team as we make changes and as we um, either as change price, make promotions, marketing uh, efforts, letting that sales team know so that the better we work together, the easier it is for them to make those final sales.
That's actually something we hear quite often, that over time pricers develop a very different relationship with sales, and get their buy-in, and it's not just about getting their feedback and their insights when it comes to pricing, but actually bringing them along in the journey, right? And making sure they feel comfortable with recommendations. Um, how about the leadership and strategy? So in promotions, very often, you can have very different goals. You could have the goal of, driving traffic. It could be, increasing share of wallet with existing customers. You could use promotions to incentivize upsell. Those are very different goals that also reflect very differently in EBITDA and other KPIs. And very often we find there's confusion. Like, different people want different things, maybe related to how they're getting paid and are incentivized. Is that something that you guys encountered as well?
Absolutely. So again, in my area, speaking about the used vehicles, we don't control um, how much inventory comes our way.
Hmm.
So as vehicles come off of lease, they get out service, they go through out service process, and then they're brought back into our inventory as a used vehicle, which is fine. But a lot of times, what happens is we can have a big rush of
Right.
vehicles at one point in time, or it could be pretty slow. So when you have a rush of vehicles or a busy season of vehicles coming into your inventory, it's how do we move that inventory very quickly, and efficiently. And our promotion strategy has usually been around moving
Moving
inventory.
inventory. Hmm.
After 60, 90 days, a vehicle has been sitting there for too long. Why is it not being sold? Let's have some type of promotion activity around it to get buyers
Right.
incentivized to buy it, which I think is a great strategy. But again, I think there's other promotions for other things um, that can be used. And I think that's something that Ryder is still working
Yeah.
through.
Just staying with strategy for a moment, we talked previously about this fascinating, business case during your time at Levi and the Atlanta Falcons Stadium. Can you maybe share a little bit about that? Because I think it's a very unusual pricing strategy overall.
Yeah. So at my time with E15 at Levy Restaurants, again, we were servicing all of our locations in the different arenas or football stadiums. And one of our clients was the Atlanta Falcons. And as they were closing the Georgia Dome, Atlanta Dome,
Hmm.
technically it's Dome,
Yeah.
they are opening up the Mercedes-Benz Arena. And this was way before the arena was even
Uh-huh.
built. There was just renderings of what it would be like. And one of the projects was, what is food and concessions going to look like in this arena? And it was very clear that ownership wanted um, a fan-friendly pricing strategy. The idea was for fans to be able to go out and buy a hot dog, hamburger, a cup of soda for the same price they would if they were out in the streets. I mean, we all know when you go to a football game, you're a captive audience, and you're at the mercy
Yeah.
of
It's expensive.
yeah. But if I'm hungry, I'm gonna pay for it, right? So again, this is a very unnatural strategy. Um, and basically, our job was to build out this pro forma of what this, what it would look like. So building out the different uh, sporting events, whether it's a Disney show, a football game, a college game. What are the events that are probably going to happen in the stadium? And let's come up with a mock menu, right? So if we have what used to be a $5 hamburger, now if we charge $2, what would that impact be, right? And then based off of how many people will come per game, per event, is there any type of increase or lift you would
Right.
get for having lower prices? I mean, you have only a certain amount of people. It doesn't. Your number won't grow exponentially, right? You only have a captive audience, so you are going to get some type of lift, but it's not going to be extraordinary.
Right.
Um, and yeah, we're just building out what that would look like. So obviously, it was at a loss, but
Right.
again, per ownership and per the vision they had, that's what they wanted.
Which is, I think, very fascinating because ultimately you were giving as a target a loss target, and you wanted to optimize with that target, kind of the consumer benefit ultimately, right? Yeah, yeah, very very fascinating story. Yeah, let's shift gears a little bit. I would like to talk about pricing organization. If you could give us just a brief overview, like where pricing sits currently at Ryder, and then also how that compares to previous roles that you had before joining Ryder. Where does pricing sit and why?
So currently at Ryder, pricing falls under the finance organization. I report directly to the group director of finance,
Mm-hmm.
and she oversees all of the other finance activities, whether it's basically working with the P&L and other organizations of the finance. However, my group is kind of separate, where we just handle pricing.
Uh-huh.
So all of our pricing decisions kind of roll up, and she's able to use that information to um, filter that into the finance organization.
Right.
How that differs from some of the other organizations I've been with, especially it differs a lot on the retail side when I was
Right.
working with Office Depot. It was the buyers and the merchants who really controlled their business. So if you think about it, there's different departments. For example, I worked in cleaning and break room, and the buyer for cleaning and break room was in charge of the of that
Right.
business. So I was basically working with him, still under the pricing organization, but a lot of my meetings and a lot of my communication was with him to make sure that his products were priced correctly or the strategy that he wanted to implement um, was aligned with the data that we
Right.
were seeing.
Which is typical for retail. It's in retail, I think, the one of the very few industries where pricing sits with purchasing because of the typical cost plus nature. You buy and pass on whatever purchase benefit to consumers. How was it in the restaurant space where was pricing anchored there?
Right. So in the restaurant space, we still rolled up under finance, but uh, our job was really to service the director of operations at
Mm-hmm.
each location. It was their responsibility to make sure that the technology, the marketing, the pricing, um, the operations in total at each location was handled appropriately.
Right.
So we would get on the phone several times a day talking about strategy, talking about pricing, to make sure that they were successful in their business, and
Right.
ultimately that rolled up to the greater business so that each location was successful.
That makes sense. What advice would you give an organization if you had a company that is just getting into pricing and say, okay, we actually need to invest in pricing and hire people and create our own little pricing department. Uh, where should they situate that? Who should that department report to based on your experience? What is your take?
Um, I do think it's a strong function of finance. So I think the
Hmm.
finance organization needs to be well aware of all the pricing decisions. But I also believe that pricing is as strong as your marketing team.
Hmm.
Because as you make pricing decisions or as you want to roll out a pricing strategy, if that's not communicated to to your customer, or if that's not in line with the sentiment of what how your customer perceives you, there's a disconnect, right? I don't want to have a everyday low price strategy, and I'm marketing myself as a premier location, right? So
Right.
I think just making sure that marketing and pricing are always on the same page, whether it's through promotions, pricing strategy, marketing strategy, they need to be succinct.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. I think particularly in the consumer industries where marketing covers the four Ps, there needs to be a close connection. How about sales? Particularly, to avoid those disconnects with the sales team and making sure they're all bought in,
Yeah.
being part of their team. Do you think that would be beneficial, or does it depend on industry or company?
Yeah, probably in the industry dependent, but
Yeah,
at the end of the day, with the sales team is you need to have their trust.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, you are practically servicing the sales team. You are helping them do their job, and I think the better the communication, the better the relationship, the easier it is for them to get what they need. And as long as those lines of communication are open, um, because they're the ones who are actually making the sales. And if there's something going on, or if there's a pricing issue, or
yeah.
if they're getting that customer feedback, um, the pricing team needs to be well aware so they can make those adjustments.
They bring home the bacon. So
Exactly.
yeah, okay. Very good. Last question for you. If you just look back at your pricing career and you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, things to do, things not to do, in order to make a career in pricing and do the right things, what would that advice look like?
Um, I would say just enjoy it more. I used to stress a lot,
Uh-huh.
um, which I've learned to kind of manage that pretty well. But um, it's just numbers, um, and your organization needs you, and the decisions you make, you know that you're making the right decisions. You have the data behind it. You have the support of your leadership of your organization. Enjoy it. I think pricing is a very fun segment of the business to work on. It covers all aspects. You're touching marketing, you're touching statistics, you're touching um, uh, analytical
Yeah,
activities. It's fun. So if I were to talk to my younger self, I would say just have a little bit more fun.
yeah. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I guess that's also why both of us have been in pricing for quite a while and it doesn't get boring.
Yeah,
So yeah, very interesting.
great question.
Well, thank you so much. It was
Thank
a real
you.
pleasure talking with you. Thank you for making time, and yeah, thanks everyone for joining.